Hey friend, as you saw last night, we started soaking some beans and it is time to pressure can them. So I'm going to take you along with me and show you how I do it. All right, I have my pressure canner here, and this pressure canner I purchased off of Amazon. It is a Presto pressure canner. It is made to go on my induction stove top. So if you haven't purchased a pressure canner before, you just want to make sure that you buy one that is safe to use on whatever stove top you are using. Now, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that there are no obstructions in the vent. And I'm going to inspect my seal here and make sure everything looks good, it's clean, there's no cracks, so that we know our product will be safely canned. I have here my booklet that came with my pressure canner, and this is what we're going to use today to pressure can these beans. And I'm using the overnight soaking method. Now it says we're going to drain these beans and put them in water, and we're going to boil them for 30 minutes before jarring them up and pressure canning them. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And while those are boiling, I will wash up all the jars I think I need. This recipe doesn't tell me how many jars it should take. When I was filling these, I did 8 cups of drying beans per variety. So I did 8 cups of pinto beans and 8 cups of kidney beans. So when we're all done, you can roughly see how many jars I came up with from doing 8 cups. I did end up with 16 pints from these 8 cups of drying beans, and so you can roughly plan on having the double amount of pints compared to how many cups you're soaking overnight. I went ahead and used my pressure canner to boil up the other type of beans, these kidney beans, because I don't have a second big pot. And so that's just something to keep in mind. If you don't have 2 big pots to do these at the same time, you can definitely use your pressure canner pot in place of that. We have all of our jars washed, and I did 32 of them because I wasn't sure how many we were going to need, and figure that should be plenty. We also have our water on to boil, and we're still waiting on this second batch of beans to finish boiling. They've got about 4 more minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and we'll get these pinto beans into jars, and once the water's hot, we'll fill the jars with some water. I'll walk you through that. But and then we'll essentially get it all ready to pressure can. All right, these are our pinto beans, and I don't want to fill it all the way to the top because they will expand a little bit. So I'm probably filling them about 3/4 of the way. All right, we got all of our jars filled, and we're just gonna debubble them. And then once we've debubbled them, we will go through and check the head space of these jars. My pressure canning book says to leave an inch head space, and so that's what I'm doing, just following those instructions. We're just gonna clean off the tops here so that we can put the lids on, make sure there's no moisture or gook. Here I'm just checking the tops of my jars, just checking for any nicks or cracks on my jars. That would cause your jar not to seal if you did have any of those, and so I just always double check before I throw them in the canner. You'll want to check your pressure canner manual, but for my pressure canner, it requires 3 quarts of water when you're pressure canning, and then I throw in about 2 tablespoons of vinegar each batch. We have a lot of hard water where we live, and so this just helps the jars to come out looking nice and clean. You can kind of see it, but this is venting, and this little, I don't know what you call it, but it's popped up, so that signifies that there's pressure in the pot. This is venting, and we need to let it vent for 10 minutes. And at that point, once the 10 minutes is up, then we will put our weight on there, and then for our altitude, we need to get to about 14 pounds. 14 psi. And once we reach 14 psi, then we can start our timer on these beans. While we're waiting on these beans to pressure cook, we've got some leftover cranberries from the holiday, and we're gonna make some canned cranberry juice. And I'm putting in here 2.5 pounds of cranberries and 8 cups of water. We're gonna bring this to a boil. We're gonna boil this until the cranberries start bursting, and then we'll let it strain for about 2 hours. these beans were done pressure canning, I did take a break from beans for a minute so that I could get my cranberry juice canned up. And I water bath canned the cranberry juice in my pressure canner with the lid off for 30 minutes. Now you'll want to check the time for your elevation because it may be less. I did have to add an additional 15 minutes due to my elevation per the recipe. So just to summarize this whole process, once we put the beans in the canner, we put the lid on, and then I turn my stove up to high and till that little turkey popper pops up and is starting to steam. And then once it's steaming through that vent, we're going to start a timer for 10 minutes. And once that 10 minutes is up, then we put our weight on that vent. And what that does is it allows the inside to start coming up to the appropriate pressure for your elevation. Now, you're going to want to reference your manual because depending on your altitude, you will use a different pressure. So for my altitude, I'm at around 6,500 feet, and so I require about 14 to 15 pounds of pressure is kind of the goal we're shooting for. And once that pressure is reached, then I kind of find that sweet spot on my stove, which for me is a low setting, and we pressure can it for about 75 minutes for pints, and if you're going to do quarts, it's going to be 90 minutes. Again, reference your manual because it will be able to tell you exactly step by step what you're supposed to do. But and then once that time is up, you're going to turn your stove off, take the canner off of that burner, and let it come down to pressure. Now, mine takes about anywhere from 45 minutes to an hour. And once the pressure is released, your little turkey popper is down and the pressure says 0 on the gauge, then you're going to take your weight off and let it sit for 10 minutes. This just allows you to know it is fully depressurized. And at that point, you're going to take your lid off, pull your jars out, and set them down. Now, you don't want to take your rings off of your jars for at least 24 hours. So at this point, it's been 24 hours. I'm cleaning my jars of any residue from seepage and writing the date on it. We are on day 2 of canning beans. We got our pinto beans and our kidney beans all canned up. We're going to try a different method today of canning beans with our black beans and our white beans. We're going to do the raw pack method instead of the overnight soak method, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Here we have our 2 types of beans that we're going to can up. We've got the black beans and the white beans. I think these are Great Northern beans. So we're going to get these washed up. I'm going to wash up about 8 cups worth, and then we'll get them put in the jar. So we're putting about ½ cup of beans in each of these jars, and then we'll add water up to that inch headspace, and then we'll get our lids on and get these pressure canned. So we are just going to follow the same steps that we took with the beans the night before when it comes to actually pressure canning these. And I forgot to mention it before, but it is optional if you want to add salt to your jars. And so I did decide with these black beans to add salt to them. I think I added about a teaspoon of salt per jar. And then We're just going to do the same process of filling them up to an inch headspace.